Hi, my name is Dale Nordenberg. I am the Executive Director of the Medical Device Innovation, Safety, and Security Consortium. A little bit of feedback. And first, I'd like to thank everybody at CodenomiCON for giving me the opportunity to talk, and to David, who just welcomed you all here today. MDIS has been a close partner of CodenomiCON's for the last couple of years. Just by way of background, let me just do a quick survey. Who here is in the technology field? Who here is not in the technology field? Who here is a doctor? Got some MDs or PhDs? Okay, how many MDs? Okay, so I'm a physician by training. I'm a pediatrician. I trained at the Centers for Disease Control as a medical epidemiologist, one of those disease doctor types. I was in the Epidemic Intelligence Service. Okay, I was most recently the Associate Director for the National Center for Infectious Diseases at the CDC and the Chief Information Officer. Before that, I was the founder for the Office of Medical Informatics at Emory's Children's Center. I set up VeriSign affiliates in Latin America and Asia for a couple of years as part of a company that we launched. So I bring to the table a perspective where healthcare and technology mix. You may be aware of the fact that the US government's pouring tens of billions of dollars to stimulate the adoption of technology in healthcare. What they want to do is stimulate data sharing in healthcare. They want interoperability. As a medical epidemiologist, you know what that means to me? Promiscuity. Promiscuity, right? More and more things are touching each other. What happens when things become promiscuous? People? What happens when people become promiscuous? They get infected. That's what happens with machines too, right? There's not just infections, but there's the hacking and there's other risks that all of you are much more familiar with than I am. Now, I did have an opportunity to serve in the technical world of healthcare technology, but it's very important as we move forward as technologists that we appreciate really the healthcare and the public health impact of what we're doing. So I would argue that the public health impact vis-a-vis medical devices, and then broader than medical devices into industrial control systems, which touch not just hospitals, but many other industries. Industries where if you had failure, you're going to compromise the public's health. Not at one or two patients at a time like a medical device, but as an epidemiologist and a public health guy, PhD public health guy, as a public health guy, I'm as or more worried about the impact of vulnerabilities in industrial control systems and how they impact chemical plants. We saw what happens to chemical plants when they blow up not long ago. Manufacturing plants for things that we might ingest or take, be they therapeutics or food, and so on and so forth. So I suggest when we sit here today that we really think in terms of the public health in the broadest terms. In public health, we look at the importance of a problem using three criteria. One is, how broad is the exposure? Let's talk about medical devices. How many times does a patient get seen by a doctor in this country in a year? Your global audience? I'm sorry, I'm not encyclopedic, but I'll share with you the US-based data. 1 billion encounters between a patient and a doctor, or the patient and a healthcare system per year in this country. Now, multiply that by at least a magnitude, and you've got the number of encounters between a person and a digitally enabled medical device. Billions. What happens when a medical device fails? Or any infrastructure fails? Adverse impact is potentially huge. And then the third criterion, one is exposure, two is the severity of the impact, the third is preventability. Now, what happens if we work together to mitigate that risk? This is why MDIS is so excited about working with CodenomiCON. And in fact, one of the first things we did as an organization was to write a white paper with CodenomiCON about the importance of fuzz testing. How could we be fuzz testing in the telecom industry and not in healthcare? Hello? Right? And so I say to people, take my data, but not my life. Right? So at the end of the day, this partnership was very important because we worked together to write a paper, a technology paper. And this company will tell you I'm pretty ferocious about marketing product through our company. But we marketed the technology. And guess what? The FDA noticed this. And recently, you may be aware of this, recently the FDA came out with a guideline, an announcement that they're going to recommend that manufacturers fuzz test their devices, just like we recommended over a year ago. And in fact, the FDA is going to buy CodenomiCON product to start to fuzz test products in their new cybersecurity laboratory. So again, critical for medical devices, critical for the healthcare infrastructure, which is one of Homeland Security's quote-unquote critical infrastructure areas. And you're going to hear more about that later, I suspect. So now let me tell you just very briefly, before I burn through too many of my minutes here, which I might have done already, I'm not sure, a little bit about MDIS. So we are a public-private partnership, not-for-profit. We have about 35 healthcare systems representing thousands of points of care. We have major manufacturers, Medtronic, Covidien, GE, Intuitive Surgical, and others. We work closely with Intel, other infrastructure companies like CodenomiCON, and other technology specialty companies, FDA, Homeland Security, HHS, Health and Human Services. We bring together these stakeholders to solve this risk, not to make it go away, but to mitigate it. Everyone here knows you can't reduce risk to zero, but we can work together to mitigate it. Just very briefly, some of the things that we've worked on in addition to the white paper with CodenomiCON, we've built and are going into beta phase for a medical device risk assessment tool. Hospitals and manufacturers could use this tool to compare 2 or more medical devices to look at their capabilities around information security and safety. So that's a critical tool adapted from one of our partners. We expanded it. It's going to be a software as a service, and we're going to build a library of medical devices and how they compare to each other. The second, actually thanks to largely to Mike Amati, who is one of CodenomiCON's key people, who you may have met, who works a lot in healthcare, medical devices. We became engaged with the WIB, a group in the Netherlands that has developed a series of best practices for vendors dealing with those that build, integrate, and operate devices. And those best practices for the industrial control system world, we're adapting to healthcare. So that's another key activity that's going into beta in the next couple of weeks as well. And I think Billy Rios will talk to you a little bit about industrial control systems and medical devices. So lastly, last point or two is that we're very interested in educating our community. If there's anyone here who's interested in working with us to help educate folks about the importance of security, we would certainly be happy to talk with you. We're launching lots of activities around policy regulation, given that the FDA has become so engaged in this topic. So with that, I'd like to, again, thank CodenomiCON, thank David and his team, and have a great time. I'm sure this is going to be a very interesting conference. Thanks, Dale.